Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Women with Heart online session. Today's talk will be nutrition tips for women over 50. Our speakers today are our registered dietitians, Fatim, Veronica, and Samantha. So without further ado, nutrition tips for women over 50.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another nutrition session. This morning, we hope to address some of the concerns specific to women over the age of 50. So we hope to review some of the healthy dietary patterns out there that can help prevent and manage chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and memory loss as we age. We will also discuss important nutrients for bone health and preventing osteoporosis. And then lastly, we'll go over our protein needs as we age. So let's start by looking at some healthy dietary patterns. If you've listened to our previous nutrition talks or looked at the Eat Healthy section of the Cardiac College website, these might look familiar. We have the Mediterranean diet, which is mainly a plant-based diet that also emphasizes healthy fats from foods such as fish, olive oil, nuts, and seeds. It's been shown to help control blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugars, and lower your chance of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and certain types of cancers. The DASH diet, or the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, is a similar eating pattern that's very effective in controlling blood pressure. It emphasizes plant foods as well, but also looks at reducing sodium intake while increasing potassium, magnesium, and calcium intake. Then we have the heart-healthy vegetarian and vegan diets that focus on whole plant foods and eliminate all animal foods. And then we also have the brain health food guide, which is fairly new, that we're actually researching here at Toronto Rehab. And this is also based on the Mediterranean and DASH diets. It emphasizes certain foods like fish, green leafy vegetables, berries, and nuts to promote brain health and prevent memory loss and Alzheimer's. And then finally in the middle, we have Canada's Food Guide, which combines all the evidence around healthy eating into an easy to follow guide based on the plate method that I'll talk about a little later. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to a sustainable diet. The diet you choose will depend on your individual goals and preferences. However, when we look at all of these healthy eating patterns, there is a common theme. They all emphasize more whole foods that come from plants. If we take a closer look, you'll notice that they all emphasize fruits and vegetables at each meal, at least half a plateful or a total of at least 7 servings each day. They also encourage switching from processed grains like white flour to whole grains like 100% whole grain breads and cereals, brown rice, barley, oatmeal, and quinoa. They include more plant protein from beans, lentils, and chickpeas, as well as more nuts and seeds on a regular basis. Each of these diets emphasizes using less highly processed and commercially prepared foods by cooking at home more often and using whole foods. And lastly, while only the vegetarian diet completely eliminates meat, all of the other diets also encourage using less red and processed meat and eating more poultry, fish, and legumes instead. So let's take a look at some of the benefits of eating these plant-based diets. So firstly, we get more vitamins and minerals. And just to give you an example, if we look at magnesium, that's an important nutrient that's crucial for cell and nerve function. In fact, it's involved in hundreds of different processes in our body. And we find magnesium in these plant foods. So for example, legumes, nuts, and whole grains would all be high sources of magnesium. When we look at foods like fruits and vegetables, they're full of phytonutrients and antioxidants that prevent cell damage, help prevent cancer, and protect our heart and our brain as we age. By eating more foods that come from plants and less meat, We're also eating more healthy unsaturated fats that lower our cholesterol and less of the solid or saturated fats that increase cholesterol and clog up our arteries. These eating patterns also are full of healthy fiber. And you get fiber in plant foods again, like whole grains, fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds. Soluble fiber can help lower cholesterol and our blood sugars, while insoluble fiber can keep our digestive tract running smoothly and prevent constipation. Both types of fibers keep us feeling full longer and help keep a healthy balance of gut bacteria. And we know that's very important because research shows that a healthy gut microbiota can help decrease inflammation in our body, keep our immune system running properly, and also prevent chronic disease. So feeding that healthy bacteria with lots of fiber from plant foods is a good thing. And finally, by eating less of the processed foods, we end up eating a lot less sodium and added sugar in our diet. Overall, these eating patterns not only keep our heart healthy, but they also keep our brain and gut healthy too. So making dietary changes doesn't have to be difficult. Start with very small steps. I know as women, we often are very hard on ourselves and we're very self-critical of our choices. So rather than focusing on foods to cut out of your diet, start by thinking of what you can add. So for example, are you eating enough nuts and seeds? So maybe you can start adding them to your cereal or your yogurt or even your salad every day. Think about your vegetable intake. Maybe you can add an extra veggie at your meal or add it as a snack. What about legumes? I know for some of us, these are a part of our everyday eating, but for others, it might be something new. So think about very simple things. You might try hummus as a dip, or just open up a can of beans and toss them into a soup or a salad. All these small changes can really have a big impact on your overall health. An easy way to know if your meals are well balanced is to look at that plate method that was seen in Canada's food guide. So start with your plate and fill half with fruits and vegetables, then add a quarter plate of whole grains, and finish off with a quarter plate of protein. And Veronica will be talking more about protein needs and choices in a few minutes. And then finally, how you eat can be just as important as what you eat. Enjoy your meals with others and use mindful and intuitive eating to help guide when you eat and how much you eat. We actually did a presentation on mindful eating a few weeks ago, and you can find it on the Cardiac College website if you're interested in learning more. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Samantha, who's going to go into a little more detail about healthy eating for our bone health.
Thanks, Fatim. As Fatim mentioned, we're going to be talking about some important nutrients for bone health. And two of those nutrients that are important for strong bones and teeth are vitamin D and calcium. Most of the body's calcium supply is found in our bones and teeth. Calcium is also important for proper functioning of our muscles, nerves, and hormones. Vitamin D helps our body absorb calcium to build strong and healthy bones and teeth. And too little vitamin D can cause our calcium levels to drop, which can result in calcium being pulled out of our bones, causing them to weaken. Our body's calcium and vitamin D requirements change as we age. So how much calcium do you need? For women over the age of 50, it's recommended to get 1,200 milligrams of calcium every day. It's preferable to get your calcium from foods that are naturally rich in calcium, since these foods provide a variety of other beneficial nutrients that are not found in calcium supplements alone. So if you're not sure if you need a supplement for calcium, speak with your dietitian or healthcare provider, as everyone's needs are different. Dairy and dairy alternative foods are some of the best sources of calcium. Some heart-healthy examples of dairy products to include in your diet are lower-fat milk, cheese, kefir, and plain unsweetened yogurt. Some examples of dairy alternatives are plant beverages like soy, almond, or other plant milks that have been fortified with calcium. This means calcium is added into the drink. Make sure to check the nutrition label to see if calcium has been added into dairy alternative products made from plants. Be aware that although different dairy alternatives may have calcium added in, they have different amounts of other nutrients such as protein. Soy milk is the most nutritionally similar to cow's milk, as it is also a good source of protein. It also contains other heart-healthy benefits. Non-dairy foods have calcium as well, although our body isn't able to absorb the calcium from some of these foods as well as from dairy or dairy alternative products. Non-dairy foods that have calcium are soy products like tofu and edamame beans, dark green vegetables like collard greens, broccoli, and spinach, as well as almonds and canned salmon with the bones. Try to get a variety of foods that have calcium in your diet to meet your body's calcium needs. These foods also have other heart-healthy properties that make them worthwhile including in your diet, such as heart-healthy fats, antioxidants, and fiber. In order to meet the recommended daily intake for calcium, aim for 2 to 3 servings of dairy or dairy alternative foods each day, which will provide around 600 to 900 milligrams of calcium. Dairy and dairy alternative foods are some of the richest sources of calcium, and eating 2 to 3 servings per day will help you meet the majority of the daily recommended calcium needs. You can see from this slide that having 3 servings of these foods will give us 860 milligrams of calcium. To make up the remainder of your calcium requirements, try to eat a variety of other calcium-rich foods such as dark green vegetables, fish with the bones, soy products, and almonds. So one example of how to meet the remainder of your calcium needs could be a small handful of almonds and 2.5 ounces of canned salmon with the bones. Together with those other 3 servings of dairy and dairy alternative products, you would get about 1,200 milligrams of calcium. How about vitamin D? So like calcium, vitamin D requirements will vary between each person based on their age, vitamin D levels, and unique needs. In general, it is recommended for women under the age of 70 to get 600 international units of vitamin D per day. For women over the age of 70, the recommendation is to get 800 international units of vitamin D per day. Some people will need a vitamin D supplement to help them meet their vitamin D needs. Speak with your doctor or registered dietitian if you are unsure if you need a vitamin D supplement. Vitamin D is not naturally found in many foods. In Canada, foods such as milk and margarine and some soy beverages and yogurts have vitamin D added to them. Some good food sources of vitamin D include certain kinds of oily fish like salmon and egg yolks. You can also get vitamin D when the sun hits your skin, but the amount of vitamin D we make can be affected by the cloud coverage, how much skin you have exposed to the sun, and if you have darker skin pigment. It can also be harmful to our skin if we expose it to sun for long periods of time. So to protect our skin, the daily vitamin D recommendations are set at a level that sun exposure is not necessary in order to get enough vitamin D to meet our needs. Next up, I'll pass it over to my colleague Veronica to talk about protein.
Great, thanks Sam. And what a great summary of the nutrients we need to pay attention to for our bone health. Now, I have the pleasure of finishing off the presentation and focusing on the importance of the nutrient protein and how it affects our muscle mass as we age. So this graph here basically explains that our muscle mass peaks in early life. So that's this section here. And then in adult life, so 40s, 50s, and 60s, we can hopefully, maintain this peak that we built. So that would last into our older life, which is defined as 65 years and older. But you notice that there's 2 lines here. So the first line is the one that hopefully we can maintain that muscle mass from early life, and we can do that by eating enough protein as well as participating in resistance training. The lower line here would represent if we neglected to do those things, so not eat enough protein or not participate in that resistance training that we should be doing. And this has the potential of being a very large decline in muscle mass, which is actually referred to something called sarcopenia. So obviously we want to help you try to prevent that and hopefully maintain this muscle mass, which is this line here. So why does our muscle mass decline when we age? And we know a couple of things. So we know that older muscles recover at a slower rate from exercise compared with younger individuals participating in similar exercise. And therefore, older adults actually have greater protein needs because of slower protein synthesis. We also know that as we age, we actually have a decreased caloric need, as well as sometimes a decreased caloric intake. And this could be for a variety of reasons, but it could be as a result of maybe reduced activity, a slower metabolic rate, loss of appetite, maybe even financial limitations. And, as we age, we just need less fuel than we used to. The other very, very common thing I see, especially with my clients that are living with heart conditions, is that they're trying to reduce their animal protein, and for a very good reason. This will help control their cholesterol levels and help better manage their heart condition. But when they eliminate this animal protein, very rarely is it replaced with a vegetarian protein source. So it's very important to make sure that if that's you, that you are still getting protein from plants. So we'll talk about that. So now that we know that, protein is important to help facilitate muscle development, how can we be sure that we're getting enough protein? First, we want to try to aim for enough protein at each meal. Well, I guess I should start with aim for protein at each meal. So a lot of the time we actually miss protein at breakfast. And then our final part of the day is usually protein heavy. But ideally, we would be getting protein at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. So maybe that's something you could think about right now. Take this moment to just think about some protein sources that maybe you could include at your breakfast meal to make sure you're getting enough. And it could be something simple. I know I will talk about what protein sources are in the next slide, but it could be something like adding your nuts to your breakfast cereal or even some hemp seeds. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and maybe in the next slide, something will inspire you. So we want to make sure we're having protein at each meal. And then we also need to consider how much protein we're having at each meal. So our body only actually needs a certain amount of protein at one time. And if it gets more calories from protein than it needs, it will actually store those extra calories in the form of fat to just be used as fuel for later on. So portions do matter, and as Fatim mentioned, using that plate as a guideline to know how much you should plate for your protein is a great idea. I have this picture here, and it's displaying that a quarter of your plate should be protein. So that's something else to consider. Plant-based protein can be high quality protein. That can be things like your soy products as well as legumes. There are lots of vegetarian protein options out there. You just have to kind of remember to include one at each of your meals. And another important point is that more protein isn't better. So as I said before, our body only uses a certain amount of protein at each meal, so we don't want to double up on protein if we missed it at a previous meal. And finally, as we've been preaching through your program at Cardiac Rehab, that moving is important. Exercise does matter. So keep moving and feed your workouts with adequate protein. When we exercise, we're actually breaking apart our muscles, and this is with resistance training. We break apart the muscles, and then post-exercise, our muscles rebuild. And they use protein to help rebuild. So ideally, eating a meal or a snack that has a little bit of protein within an hour or two after your resistance exercises will actually help facilitate this muscle rebuild for you. So something else to consider. Again, you don't need to add more protein, just make sure that you're eating the protein after exercise. So maybe fitting exercise into your schedule when meal times are, or I guess before meal times. So where is protein found? What are protein sources? Well, as most people are aware, we have the animal protein here, which is our red meat, our beef, our chicken, our pork. It's also found in dairy products, so Samantha went over a bunch, but that could be our cheese. Greek yogurt is a good source, as well as cow's milk. We have soy products in the next picture here. That's tofu and edamame displayed there. Edamame is a great snack to include, a type of soybean, as well as tofu is something you could, simply roast up and add to a stir fry. If you haven't tried that, I would encourage that. Tempeh is another great soy product to try. Where else is protein found? We have fish, as well as our nuts and nut butters, and then finally our legumes. So that's things like lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans. So these are all great sources of protein. If you're not including maybe a group of these, maybe that's something to explore going forward to see if you can include some more protein. And finally, I'll end on this slide here. And this is actually what Fatim started with, and it's the Mediterranean dietary pattern. I chose to highlight this one, but you could, take any of the patterns that she presented, the DASH diet or even the vegetarian diet. And I just wanted to highlight where the protein falls in each, or in this dietary pattern. So this dietary pattern is displayed in a pyramid because we want to eat most of our food that's found at the bottom of the pyramid, and then the ones that are found at the top of the pyramid, we want to be eating less often. So if we look at where the protein is, at the bottom here, you can see that it's actually our nuts and seeds, as well as our legumes. So they're found in the part that we want to eat most often, so almost every day if possible. And then fish more often than things like poultry, so our chicken, our dairy products like our cheese and yogurt. And then finally, that's less often than at the very top, which is our red meat. So I hope that puts it into perspective that, we want to be eating more protein from plants. And then it just gives you an idea of what choices you can include at your meal. So what protein choices you can eat if you're not already eating all of these. So that's it for the presentation today. I hope it was helpful and it provides you with some context about some of the nutrients to focus on as women. And now, Lisa, I think we can open it up for some questions.
That's great. Thank you very much. I do actually have a question for Samantha while others type their questions in. Sam, you talked about canned salmon or canned fish with bones in it. Does that mean that you're to eat those bones, or it's just that they're stored with the bones and then you can pick the bones out before you actually eat it?
That's a good question. Thanks, Lisa. So ideally, when we're choosing any kind of canned fish products, first we'd want to look to see if they're low sodium, ideally canned in water. So those are good things to kind of keep in mind. And the bones in the can, they do soften. Obviously, if there's really big chunks that are hard, sometimes you'll find those in there. You'd probably want to discard those. But the bones that are in the can, that's actually where that calcium is going to be found. So the bones that have been kind of softened, the small little bones, you'd want to eat those. The very big, large pieces that are kind of still hard, you'd probably want to discard those. So yeah, that's a great question. And definitely, trying to still look for those low sodium products that are canned in water.
Great, thank you. For any of you, actually, is there a spot that we can go to find some recipes or other nutrition tips that we can look at besides referring back to this presentation and some of your other presentations? Is there any places on Cardiac College website or Healthy University website?
Yeah, great question. So yes, Lisa, if you look under the Eat Healthy section of the Cardiac College website, lots of information around heart healthy eating. There are recipes and videos as well that you can look at. Everything from how to make hummus to Mediterranean fish or soup, and then also videos on how to choose products in the grocery store. So as Sam mentioned, what to look for when you're looking at a can of something, for example, or how to choose a healthy oil or a healthy legume. Another great website in terms of recipes is cookspiration.com. And it's run by Dietitians of Canada, and it's filled with hundreds and hundreds of healthy recipes. And you can choose recipes based on the time of day or the ingredient. It's also great if you have any intolerances or allergies. You can exclude recipes that contain ingredients that you don't want. So that's another good place to look. And then lastly, unlockfood.ca. And we have these links actually on the Cardiac College website as well, is a great place just for general nutrition information. And it covers lots and lots of different topics, everything from heart healthy eating to diabetes to nutrition for children, commonly asked questions. There's a section on healthy eating during COVID. So lots of great information on there as well.
Great, thank you. Once somebody starts to have signs of sarcopenia or osteoporosis, can you reverse that by eating more nutrients specific to those things, protein, calcium, etc.? Or once you have it, you can kind of just maintain where you are and prevent it from getting worse?
I can speak to the sarcopenia part. If you are identified as having reduced muscle mass, then participating in that resistance training and eating adequate protein definitely can help build your muscle mass back. So it's something that you can not only maintain but to build back. Of course, it will be slow, and what we really are trying to preach is that we want to prevent it from happening in the first place. But if you have noticed that, or your doctor has pointed it out, then it definitely can be managed.
So with the bone health, we definitely want to try and focus on building up our stores, earlier on in life in terms of our bone mass or bone density. But as we age, there is going to be that bone thinning. So our goal would definitely be to try and maintain as much of that bone mass and prevent as much of the bone thinning as possible. And the best way to do that would be to supplement yourself with the food sources, not supplements themselves necessarily, but give yourself adequate amounts of calcium and vitamin D through diet, and then of course the exercise. So trying to maintain more than necessarily rebuild, I think would be probably the goal for most people around that. But definitely if you have concerns around, are you getting enough calcium? Are you getting enough vitamin D? Speak with your doctor or dietitian to see if a supplement is needed or necessary, and try and focus on getting enough of those calcium-rich foods in your diet.
That's great, thank you. So unless the three of you have any closing remarks, then we will end our session there.
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much, Lisa, and thanks for all the interesting questions you came up with.
No problem, and thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate these nutrition talks very, very much. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. And I encourage you to join us next Tuesday, July 28th at 10 a.m. for a presentation by Dr. Carolina Carvello. She's going to do an update on your medications, telling you a little bit more about them and opening it up to a Q&A with her. So please join next Tuesday, July 28th at 10 a.m. We look forward to it. Thank you all very much for joining and have a wonderful week.